Alright, so this is the headquarters monument for General Ulysses S. Grant. He was, of course, the Union general. He was kind of known as an interesting character. He was pretty mild-mannered, and a lot of people didn't think he was fit for the position that he was put in, but he proved many people wrong by being one of the first Union heroes at the battles of Fort Donelson and Fort Henry. So he was in the Mexican-American War, and then after that was over, he moved back to Missouri to be with his family. There he tried a number of different occupations, one of those being farming, but he didn't like any of them and seemed to fail at every single one of them. So he decided to go back into the military.
And we're back out on the tour.
Next stop after Fraley Field, and there is the site of another battle. Each board gives a timeline of the day's events.
This is where, on the early morning in Fraley Field, you know, they had the battle line. So then here was where the Confederates really pushed. So I guess, like, this was that original. I don't know where Fraley Field is. It's not on this map.
Okay, we passed Rhea Field, so it's got to be back that way somewhere. Lost Field, interesting.
I'm not really sure what's going on here. There was... Yeah.
It was a Confederate attack. The early morning skirmish in Fraley Field with the corn alerted forward Union commanders to the tens of thousands of Confederate soldiers descending upon their southernmost camps. General Benjamin M. Prentiss hastily organized a battle line along the next ridge in front of you to engage a massive Confederate onslaught. Fighting continued here for about an hour as Union troops halted and hurled back the initial Confederate attacks. As more Confederate brigades entered the fight, threatening their exposed flanks, Prentiss's troops retired their battle line 1/4 mile north to defend their camps.
Still advancing, firing as we moved, I at last saw a row of little globes of pearly smoke streaked with crimson breaking out with sportive quickness from a long line of bluey figures. Private Henry M. Stanley, Company E, 6th Arkansas Infantry. Was he the explorer?
He is.
Oh,
The missionary explorer?
yeah, I think he might have been. If he is, he found Dr. Livingston.
We'll fact check it before we do the show.
And that's true.
Yeah.
All I need is to get to where there's some internet and Google it.
Nothing is more on the fly than the stuff I shoot.
When the battle started, Grant was at Cherry Mansion in Savannah, Tennessee. He boarded a boat and disembarked at Pittsburgh Landing and began to assess the situation and make order out of disarray.
Shiloh Fiery Trial tells about all of the stuff that we're covering, and this spot here is interesting, which was in the film, but we'll show you what it is. Here Confederate troops experienced their first victory of the battle.
Look at this quote. The Yankees left everything they had: corn, oats, pants, vests, drawers, shirts, shoes, and a great many other things in great abundance and of the finest quality. Private Liberty Independence Nixon, 26th Alabama Infantry.
Wow.
His name was Liberty Independence.
That is cool. And that was from the South. So, after the battle at Tour Stop 8, which is where we just were at, the Confederate attack, they were defending their camps. The Confederates won that skirmish, that battle, and
They were able to advance.
So they came here.
It's not really over, but they were able to advance. So the camps are abandoned by the Union soldiers. And instead of pushing, there was like a complete break in discipline, and everybody just started looting. They were hungry, so they're getting food.
Yeah,
Or
some of
drinking
them.
coffee. They're like, oh my goodness, that would have been me. Coffee.
Some of these guys had not eaten in days. I want to say some of them had not eaten in 3 days. So they were starving. They were really hungry. And they overtook this Union camp, which, as the wayside just said, had all kinds of stuff.
And this is where Albert Sidney Johnston comes out on his horse and kind of scolds them, like, what are you doing? Yeah, because it's like a complete break, right? And then he could see that he was sort of demotivating them, so he, like, picked up a tin cup with his sword and rattled it and was like, okay, this is my spoils, let's go, like, trying to get them to go. But meanwhile, they're here a while, and then I want to say the Union soldiers come back.
So Johnson was such a great general, or Johnston was such a great general that, who was it, Jefferson Davis said, if he's not our general, then we don't have a general. He was really good at motivating.
Yeah, he had just been criticized because there were 2 defeats. There was Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, where Grant defeats them, but the Confederates just sort of gave up. They didn't really evacuate. They just surrendered. Like, Nathan Bedford Forrest was there, and he got out. He's like, I didn't come up here to surrender. So he takes his troops and anybody who would go with him, and he escaped. Everybody else was surrendered. The 2 first generals, they escaped, and then the 3rd guy in control had to surrender. So I guess Albert Sidney Johnston's coming off of this.
Yeah.
He wants a victory.
Headquarters, 1st Brigade, 6th Division, Army of the Tennessee. Colonel Everett Peabody, 25th.
And then, so Peabody was kind of the hero of the story.
Peabody was killed here
This is where Peabody was killed?
at 9 a.m., April 6, 1862. Yeah, because remember, these kind of markers are where somebody was killed. And this was a camp. I don't know how it is for you guys, but for me, seeing a place now and seeing it 160 years ago is fascinating. It's like I can sit there and flip back and forth between the pictures and just like visualize. It's amazing. Frequently you can see roads cutting through the woods that are not in use, because this was once farmland, even before the war.
So when J.D. Putman died, they buried him here, and there was a tree, so they carved his name and everything in the tree. So then when they did the battlefield, I guess they took over the battlefield, they gave him a headstone that looks like the tree stone.
That's pretty interesting. Rest in peace, J.D. Putnam. Confederate States, Stevens, 2nd Brigade, 7th Kentucky, 9th Tennessee, and 6th Tennessee. These regiments of this brigade, in order from left to right as above, were engaged here for 2 unsuccessful charges at about 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. April 6, 1862. The command was then moved by right flank along Hamburg Road to the Peach Orchard, where it joined Breckenridge. So these, it just keeps going. I can't show you everything. If you want to see everything in minute detail, you have to actually like come here.
It's been a couple days because
It takes forever. There's a lot of information here, an awful lot. And also, like, this sign and this sign happened at different times. So like they have markers for where things happened, but they weren't all happening at the same time. Like that sign may have happened hours after this sign. Rustic.
The fighting was very constricted given the landscape and chaotic, and Grant knew he had to keep control.
These signs are times and positions of regiments.
It was just this bitter fighting,
Yeah.
and like you're gaining a little bit of ground, you're losing a bit of ground, and nobody's giving up.
Yeah. Look at the shape of this. It's got all kinds of... peeling. '18th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry participated in the Battle of Shiloh, April 6th and 7th, 1862. It lost 23 killed, 83 wounded, 174 missing, total 280.
These relief carvings are amazing work.
More of that fantastic artistry. Dedicated by the state of Wisconsin to her valiant sons who on April 6th and 7th, 1862 fought on this battlefield for the preservation and perpetuity of the Union. Look at this.
Probably because of the cheese.
Maybe.
The Confederates were pushing hard and the Union Army was unprepared for the attack. The first day, the Confederates were the attacking army. Grant was a man who was in control of his emotions, and he and Sherman forged a strong working partnership.
Some of these signs were a little worse for wear.
His plan, given the circumstances, was to hold out until Buell and Wallace got there. It was in this battle that Grant became who we know. We tracked down a side path into an important part of the battlefield.
So Stacey just pointed out, I had forgotten, even though I knew that's where we're headed, that this is the Hornet's nest. And all these markers are like battles or skirmishes and retreats. This is where some of the really bad fighting took place. And again, Hornet's nest named for the buzzing sound of the bullets flying. Sounded like hornets by somebody's observation, and the name stuck. So we're in the middle of one of the really heated battles of the Battle of Shiloh.
Shiloh was not a good showing for Grant in the eyes of Henry Halleck and the press. He was temporarily demoted afterwards. Buell got the credit for the Union's success the second day, but Grant got blamed for the bloodshed. Grant almost resigned, but was talked out of it by William T. Sherman.
6th Battery Light Artillery, commanded by Captain Andrew Hickenlooper, Prentice's 6th Division, Army of the Tennessee.
Little sign that says Hornet.
We totally saw a vehicle on something else.
I kept hearing references to the sunken road. I weren't sure where it is. Well, this is the sunken road.
It's not really sunken. I think they thought it was sunken because of the flooding. Imagine one of these carrying around.
Yeah. The hornet's nest.
Many men met their end here in these woods in the most brutal ways. The second day, with Wallace and Buell having arrived, the Union became the attacking army. Then we find something that hits hard, a tragedy within a tragedy, and I don't catch it at first.
31st Infantry, commanded by Colonel Charles Cruft, wounded Lieutenant Colonel John Osborne.
Oh no.
This regiment took this position Sunday and held it against repeated charges of the enemy until 2:30 p.m. During this time, the woods in front caught fire and many dead and wounded were burned. The regiment was then transferred to the left and was engaged east of the Hamburg Road until 4 p.m. when it slowly retired to the support of the siege guns. On Monday, April 7th, it was engaged during the day on the right center of the army. Casualties killed 2 officers, 19 men, wounded 4 officers, and 110 men, missing 3 men, total 138. Wow.
The horror of this was not lost on us. On top of the pain of battle, the flames offered no mercy. It was just a reminder that this is a place to take very seriously. Every one of these monuments stands in place of the men who witnessed and endured such terrible things. The Hornet's Nest.
So we stepped off a side road from the side road, and back in the distance I spotted another monument. '44th Infantry. Colonel Hugh B. Reed. I just want to make a note. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but again, here's a mention of the woods catching fire. 7 flag bearers were shot down. Total number of casualties, 212.
With all the smoke and confusion, flag bearers were critical.
So this This is also part of the hornet's nest.
Fierce fighting all in here. Woods catching on fire. Just like
Mayhem.
mayhem. It's really, like when you're here and you read this stuff, it's truly sad and horrifying.
I think this is, oh no, there's one more.
I think we're good. No.
Look at this grass. It's like really a beautiful area. Now we've been walking for a while. This just gives you an idea of how thoroughly through these woods this stuff took place.
This regiment went into action Sunday, April 6, 1862, on the south side of this field about 9 a.m. It soon fell back to this place, which held against repeated attacks until 2 p.m., when it fell back 200 yards, and 1 hour later withdrew to the Wicker Field. Here it was engaged until 4 p.m. when it retired, fighting to its camp, where it was nearly surrounded, but broke through the ranks of the enemy and joined the command of Colonel M.M. Crocker in front of the 2nd Iowa camp, where it bivouacked Sunday night. On Monday, it was engaged under Lieutenant Crossley, he being senior officer for duty, present for duty, including officers, musicians, teamsters, etc., 560. Its loss was 23 men killed, 6 officers and 128 men wounded, 3 officers and 27 men missing, total 187. Whoa.
We step out into this really picturesque open field.
I've always wanted to run through a big field like this.
Colonel John Logan, wounded. Advancing the line of battle April 6, 1862, through this field to the timber, then fell back to this position and engaged the enemy from about 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. when it moved to the left in the rear of the 41st Illinois. The regiment lost in the battle 3 officers and 36 men killed, 6 officers and 108 men wounded, 5 men missing, total 158. So if you look at the numbers of these fights, every one total 158. It's just like the numbers just mount up and mount up and mount up and mount up. The number of deaths in this war is just obscene. And this is just one battle of the Civil War.
And for every battlefield death, there were 4 deaths to disease.
Yeah. 32nd Infantry, 1st Brigade, Williams 4th Division, Hurlbut, Army of the Tennessee. Look over there.
Hey look, an old cabin.
There's another tour stop on which that house is, we think. So we're gonna make our way, because there's people parking over there and we're way the heck over there, so I know it's a tour stop, so we'll come back.
The second mass grave of this journey.
Statistics alone cannot express the suffering and loss at Shiloh. After the battle, cries of the wounded and dying still filled the air and bodies littered the ground. Union burial details searched the battleground for remains, burying Union and Confederate soldiers separately, often in large trenches. Despite efforts to bury all the dead immediately, Union troops continued to discover remains until June. Unfortunately, the Federals were unable to identify their Confederate opponents killed during the battle. Officially classified as unknown, they were buried separately throughout the battlefield. The historic mass grave in front of you is one of the 5 that Shiloh battle veterans were able to identify and preserve when the national park was established in 1894. When the grave was ready, we placed the bodies therein, 2 deep. The father, brother, husband, and lover all lie till Gabriel's trumpet shall sound. All the monument reared to those brave men was a board, nailed to a tree at the head of the trench, upon which I cut with my pocket knife the words, 125 rebels. To the Confederate dead in the trenches erected by Tennessee Division, UDC, 1935.
It's a little trail.
They never came home to their families, lost without even a name. But
I will say that these Confederates, though they're in mass graves, have a very beautiful and peaceful place to be. Okay, so we just passed a battle in a field where there was a fierce battle where the Confederates were all in the trees and their cries, their rebel yells, caused someone to call for a retreat. But we have come down the road just a hair. Oh. Burial place, 45th Illinois Infantry. Bodies removed to National Cemetery. Well, that's good.
but only some.
To the Confederate dead in the trenches, erected by the UDC AD 1917. Unknown soldier.
I'm guessing these separate little graves are when they find bodies accidentally.
Oh, yeah.
So these were not removed out of the burial trench. They were Union and Confederate. The Union soldiers were moved to the National Cemetery. The Confederate soldiers remain.
Yeah.
I feel like we keep making this point a lot, but you don't have to use it every time we make it.
It can't be made enough, really.
To this day, families can only wonder and assume what became of their loved ones.
So we've circled around. We've passed a few places. This one is important. They're all important, but this one is.
I can only hope the magnitude of the loss of life is translated in this series of videos.
So what has happened here?
I don't know, where is you or here? I don't even know where we are in this map. Okay, so this is the Confederate offense, and it says Confederate offense stall. So you know the Confederates are attacking. This is around 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on April 6th, so it's the first day of the battle. They're pushing, and then at this point, they can go no further. And they are forced to retreat in the mid-afternoon, and Colonel David Stewart of the United States was wounded. So they retreated. So they retreated north to join the other Union forces near Pittsburgh Landing. But why? If it's a Confederate stalled offense.
After nearly 6 hours, the first day's battlefront had advanced to this point from where it began about 2 miles to the southwest. With the first Union camps captured, General Albert Sidney Johnston turned his attention to a strong Union force, reported to be threatening his right. Colonel David Stewart's brigade, on the Union's left flank, was encamped here and assigned to guard the Hamburg Road. Johnston deployed 2 brigades under General Jones M. Withers to attack Stewart. Withers' infantry, led by General James Chalmers and Colonel John K. Jackson, supported by artillery, quickly drove Stewart from his camps and onto a new position to the east, right. Isolated from the Union forces heavily engaged to their northwest, Stewart waged a stubborn defense, stalling Withers' advance for 3 long hours. Finally forced to retreat at mid-afternoon, the wounded Stewart with his surviving troops retreated north to join the other Union forces near Pittsburgh Landing.
So do you understand?
Sort of, yeah. Ohio, 71st Infantry, commanded by Colonel Rodney Mason, Stewart's 2nd Brigade, Sherman's 5th Division, Army of the Tennessee. I can't even read this standing here.
This regiment formed line of battle here at 11 a.m. April 6, 1862, but was soon driven back to the ravine in the rear. Lieutenant Colonel Barton S. Kyle was killed while attempting to rally the regiment. Its loss was 18 officer and 13 men killed, 44 men wounded, 1 officer, and 50 men missing, total 109. I don't understand how the Confederate offense is stalling if they're driving back the Union troops.
I don't know. I don't understand.
We read the wayside, we still don't know.
Still don't know. Oh look, a trail. Yeah, let me go first. I don't know. I have no idea what's back here. I think the ravine is back here. Yeah, there's a ravine. So we're going to receive the ravine Stacey just read about. I had heard about the ravine in earlier studyings while here, and here it is.
What happened here?
The men were driven back to the ravine. But it seems like it would be an easy enough ravine to go down in and back out the other side, so I don't know.
It's pretty steep. I mean, if they're being shot at and they're scrambling and everybody's like, hell no.
Well, that's true.
Everyone's exhausted.
Like we are right now?
Yeah, I was like, this is just a dawdle. I was like, I couldn't go down that ravine right now. After the fighting ended, medical officers from both armies faced caring for 16,420 wounded men. Army surgeons, assisted by civilian doctors and nurses, and hundreds of soldiers struggled to provide effective medical care with limited resources. As was typical at the time, armies transported wounded soldiers off the battlefields to nearby towns. And most of the 8,408 Union wounded went by steamboat to nearby Savannah, Tennessee, or even farther away to northern cities. Most of the 8,012 Confederate wounded went first to Corinth, Mississippi. From Corinth, they were transported by rail to communities throughout the Western Confederacy. Limited transportation options forced Union medical officers to establish makeshift field hospitals on Shiloh Battlefield. Here on the high ground, surrounding the Cantrell farmhouse, Dr. Bernard Irwin set up a 300-patient tent hospital. Using the 4-room house as the surgery station, Irwin had tents, bedding, and supplies confiscated from Union camps to equip this hastily crafted battlefield medical facility. Irwin's tent hospital at Shiloh was a forerunner of modern mobile army surgical hospitals.
The MASH unit.
J.D. Irwin learned from his experience at Shiloh. Triage on the field, rather than transporting the wounded, resulted in better patient response to treatment and more lives saved.
I desire to call special attention to the admirable hospital arrangements adopted by Dr. Irwin during the battle, they will be found as nearly perfect as the circumstances would allow.
Brigadier General William Bull Nelson, 4th Division, Army of the Ohio. So, Albert Sidney Johnston was mortally wounded here trying to rally some unmotivated, frightened, green Tennessee troops.
At Shiloh in early April 1862, General Albert Sidney Johnston sought to attack General Ulysses S. Grant's Army of the Tennessee before General Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio arrived from Nashville. Just weeks earlier, the Federals had forced Johnston's Confederate forces to abandon Kentucky and Middle Tennessee. Now Johnston hoped destruction of Grant's army at Shiloh would turn the tide of the war in the West. The battle began early on Sunday morning, April 6, 1862. By mid-morning, the tide of battle favored the Confederates, as two frontline Union divisions, despite a stubborn defense, were driven north from their camps. Johnston personally encouraged his troops, proclaiming, "Today we must conquer or perish." Then, at mid-afternoon, while personally directing an attack, Johnston was fatally wounded. As second-in-command, General Pierre G.T. Beauregard assumed command of the Confederate forces. The Confederates ended the day sure of their victory. The next day, however, with Buell's army having arrived on the battlefield overnight, the tide of battle rapidly reversed, turning against the Confederates and forcing them from the field.
Okay, let's get a shot of that, because this is like he was shot in the back of the leg. They take off his boot, it's full of blood. And he just bleeds out. It was an artery. This was between 2:30 and 2:45 p.m. on the first day, April 6, 1862.
I searched but found no visible wound upon his body. He expired without pain a few moments after, and about 15 minutes after he received his death wound.
Who was Albert Sidney Johnston?
He was said to have a magnetic personality that really just drew people to him, and that helped to make him a really good leader for the Confederates. He also had a really long-lasting friendship with the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. They went to West Point together, then they fought in the Mexican-American War together, and they remained friends throughout the Civil War until Johnston was killed here at the Battle of Shiloh. At one point, Johnston was undergoing a lot of criticism and doubt because of his losses at Fort Donelson and Fort Henry, but the Confederate President Jefferson Davis came to his defense and said, "If he is not our general, then we had better give up this war, for we have no general."
Johnston was the highest ranking officer in both armies to die in the entire Civil War. So we go down this path, crudely made steps out of beams. Is a broken monument. Broken plate with no information upon it. It's gone. It looks like it may have been broken, knocked off by a tree. And maybe
Our expert detective work has led us to believe that maybe this gigantic tree has something to do with that.
I can't tell you how many hours of detective work I had to do to figure that out.
But this serene copse of trees is where he passed away. So he was wounded up there, and I think they dragged him to this area.
And here Johnston died.
With Johnson having been killed, Beauregard ordered the Confederates to retreat back to Corinth. The two-day battle brought more casualties than all the armies of the wars in America up to that time. The spot Johnson received his fatal wound.
General Albert Sidney Johnston, commanding the Confederate Army, was mortally wounded here at 2:30 p.m. April 6, 1862. Died in the ravine 50 yards southeast at 2:45 p.m., which we just saw. Okay, so we have made our way back around to this field we came out on when we were walking through the Hornet's Nest, the sunken road. This was a peach orchard. I guess it is not anymore, just an example, but it was in full bloom when the Confederates attacked.
There's peach trees right in front of your face.
Yeah, but there's like 3. I have a feeling there were more like 3,000 here.
I don't know.
It was in full bloom when the Confederates attacked, and the Union had to retreat to Pittsburgh Landing. They, however, retook this spot the next day.
We crossed a little ravine and up a slope and relieved a regiment on the left of Hurlbut's line. The line was desperately engaged and had been at this point, as we afterwards learned, for fully 4 hours. Private Leander Stillwell, 61st Illinois Infantry.
You can pause and read this if you want. What has my interest here is right down that row of fences, is the house we saw from behind that monument. There's the monument over there from which I saw the house. And there are the rows of cannons we shot and the woods we came through over there. And you can see this big open field, very serene. And I want to see this house. Look at that chimney.
You can't go inside, right?
Apparently not, no. That chimney's definitely a reconstruction. And it will not open. Okay, I'm gonna guess this is a recreation because that looks like fairly modern concrete and not field stone. So my guess is this is a reconstruction.
Despite my initial belief that this was a reconstruction, this house is the only surviving structure from the land that became the battlefield of Shiloh.
Either way, it's still very cool, and it's reminiscent of the Ownby cabin, which if you spin backwards in my videos, you will find in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So this is Bloody Pond. Throughout the battle, soldiers from both sides came here to drink and dress their wounds.
And horses.
And horses. And horses and men died here and their blood stained the water.
Yeah, I've heard some accounts in the Civil War of wounded men making it to the water and sticking their heads in and being so weak that they couldn't get their heads back out and just drowned there and died there.
There's fish in it. Yeah, it's teeming with fish. Very small fish. Willard's Battery, U.S.
2 p.m. to 4 p.m. April 6th.
This battery was engaged here from what Stacey just said.
2 p.m. to 4 p.m. April 6, 1862, when it then retired to Pittsburgh Landing.
4th U.S. Artillery, Batteries H and M. Captain John Mendenhall, 5th Division, Crittenden, 5th U.S. Artillery, Battery H, Captain William R. Terrell, 2nd Division, McCook, Army of the Ohio.
So day 2 action. This brigade with its regiments in order as above was engaged here at 10 a.m. April 7th, 1862. It advanced across the Peach Ridge.
We plan to come back. Until then, see you down the road.
Bloody Pond.